Have you ever thought about making your own podcast? It seems like that's the in thing right now. Well, do I have the people for you? Anchor is a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing your podcast. Best of all, it's 100% free and extremely easy to use. And now, Anchor will match you with great sponsors who want to advertise on your podcast. That means you can get paid for podcasting right away. To get started, go to anchor.fm/start. Once again, that's anchor.fm/start. Welcome back, everybody, to the episode of the Jay Stevens Podcast, part of the Off the Ball Network. This is episode 197, dedicated to a team or a city who on May 24th, 1934, hosted the first Major League Baseball night game. It was in Cincinnati. The Reds beat the Phillies 2-1. And as always, thank you for listening and downloading another episode of the podcast. On today's episode, we talk a little bit about the energy at Madison Square Garden, decades in the NBA, which one was more enjoyable to watch, and our no-hitters, the amount that we've had this year, has it diminished the accomplishment that so many have had so far? But first, LeBron James. No, we're not talking about the foul or what you want to call was the foul that was called on Chris Paul and the scuffle that came after that where LeBron, who ended up bracing himself on the fall, acted like his shoulder was dislocated. No, not that. But a couple days prior to that, it was announced that LeBron did attend a photo shoot and he broke the league's health and safety protocol for the Rona. Now, I'm a person, haven't really done it much here, said it much on here, but I'm a person that truly believes that many of these athletes have not stayed home the entire time. I'm a person that believes that many of these athletes have gone on vacations and really haven't told anybody, kept things under wraps because they're athletes, because they have the means to do so. Now, I'm not saying everybody has, but when you're telling me at the end of the Super Bowl when things are supposed to be shut down tight around certain places around the country, then all of a sudden you got a coach and a quarterback, not saying names, are out on vacation in the same spot. I truly believe NBA basketball players who had a 3 or 4 month hiatus, they might have been shut down then, but All-Star break, come on now, let's just be honest. There's a good chance that many of these athletes were doing things that the league said, no, don't do it, or you will be suspended. Well, LeBron ended up attending a photo shoot. I think it was a photo shoot for Drake, and I forget who else was there, but LeBron broke the rules. And we have seen players like Kyrie Irving and others that break the rules during this time period that get suspended. And the media ridicules them. The media talks bad about them. The media tells that player all about themselves and how they're not thinking team first. They're not putting the team and their teammates above their own personal aspirations and what they want to do as an individual. No, regardless if you're going to a birthday party or if you're simply taking care of your mentals, you're not thinking about other people, so therefore you're the bad apple, you're the wrong person. Oh, but wait, there's a double standard. Now, we know there's a double standard in sports. We know that for a very long time. You get certain players like LeBron, like KD, like James Harden. They're going to get certain calls that other people do not. But with this country and the entire world, in the way of putting health and safety of the masses, not just the individuals, but the masses at the forefront of so many elected officials, you would think this would be a great time to say, no, you're not doing that. That's wrong. You're suspended. But no, Adam Silver did not do that. Adam Silver didn't suspend anybody, and LeBron played game 1. Lakers ended up losing that game. But Adam Silver had the chance. He already is a beloved commissioner. He already is an individual that's coming in after David Stern, who many say is the greatest commissioner in American sports history. He has done things that David Stern may or may not have done. I don't know. But he was put into a tough spot when Donald Sterling, shortly after Silver took over for Stern, Donald Sterling, those tapes got exposed, and Adam Silver said Donald Sterling is banned for life from the National Basketball Association. and so on and so forth. There's so many other different announcements and so many decisions that he has made that has made him beloved by those inside the NBA that get paid by the NBA and those that are fans, not just in America, but around the world as well. But this is a time for you to continue the thought and the idea and the mission that you have been on the entire time to come out and say, LeBron, we know what you mean to the Lakers. We know how this league has built the league and how they promoted the league using you as the face. But you, sir, cannot do that. You're breaking the rules. The rules apply to you just like they apply to everybody else. Wrong. There is a double standard. There always has been a double standard, and it's really something that was put in front of us once again over the weekend. Do I think LeBron should have been suspended for going? Yes. Do I think LeBron, if I was LeBron, would I have gone? I mean, the thought's always there, but me, myself, and I, if I was LeBron and thinking, well, if I go, there's a possibility of getting suspended, and if I don't go, I won't get suspended, I probably wouldn't have gone because the playoffs are coming up, but that's me, not LeBron. LeBron lives his life the way he wants to, and we are left to discuss what LeBron did or did not do by not getting suspended. I think Charles Barkley said it best. I'm not going to say it word for what he said, but Charles Barkley said, there's no effing way Adam Silver suspends LeBron James, and he was right. Let's go ahead and take a trip to New York City because watching the Knicks game on Sunday and hearing the fans brought back so many memories of how enjoyable it is to have fans, almost a full stadium, while watching a basketball game. Last year, when sports were suspended or temporarily away from our lives, many people were wondering, one, when would sports come back? Well, the sports that we love, but also two, when they do come back, will fans be there? And I could go a third way with that as well. If fans don't go back and if they're not in attendance when sports return, when will fans be able to return to stadiums? You see in the NBA, they went down to a bubble in Orlando, Florida. The WNBA went to a bubble or a wubble, as they called it, in Bradenton, Florida. You had the NFL playing their games in their home stadiums. A lot of the stadiums had fans in attendance, a limited capacity. I don't believe any NFL game was sold out last year, including the Super Bowl. And then you had the NBA, when they did return, went back to playing in their home arenas, but still, most of the NBA teams were not allowing fans to go. In college football, you had a lot of Southern schools that had fans there, and honestly, to me, those were the best environments for the viewing experience when they had 20, 25, maybe 30% capacity during games last year. I do go back and I remember in my head right now watching a Clemson game. I don't know who they're playing. I believe it was a day game, this particular game that's in my head right now. But they had the stadium kind of in columns. You would sit in a column saying you would be everybody in section 100, then on top of that 200, everybody on top of that section 300. They would have rows. They would divide it up into 3 separate sections. So section 1 in the row 100 section, you would sit there. And then there'll be some spaces, segment 2 in vertical columns, a little bit of space, segment 3, vertical columns as well. And I saw pictures of that going around the social media, and people were saying there is no way that stadium is at 25% capacity. You mean to tell me that's 25%? That looks like 50, 60, 70%. And people were going people were going crazy saying, how in the world is that actually happening? And I'm just saying, look, it's a great way for the TV. It's a great way to play on our eyes. And they're doing a great way of getting as many people inside that stadium that they can. I don't think that, I honestly think that more stadiums and teams could have had fans in the stands, but they didn't. And then so college football, college basketball, you had the same thing. Big Ten, I believe, had no fans at all during any game. You had a limited amount of fans during the Big Ten basketball tournament, Big Ten Conference basketball tournament in Indianapolis. For the NCAA tournament, the men's, they had a capacity of 25% per venue that was hosting a game. Indiana University there in Bloomington, Indiana, that was a site for, I believe, the opening round or the the first four, I think the first and second round, they only had a capacity allowed of 500 fans. Down there in that area, that county, they have been super, 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 super strict about fans and attendance, people doing anything in large masses. So that's kind of how my mindset was when things would return. How would they be? The Pacers, Indiana Pacers, a team that I really haven't paid as much attention to this year, not as closely as I normally do with me covering the Ohio State Buckeyes, but when I do pay attention and watch the games, I do see, well, there aren't many fans there. When you go from the LA to the Oakland, the Oakland or San Francisco, where they currently are, or you go to the New York Knicks, or you go to the Brooklyn Nets, or you go down to Miami, or you go to anywhere in the NBA, you would have seen, for the most part, beginning of the season, not many people in attendance. Middle of the season, a little bit more. I know the Hawks had fans in attendance. I know there was a lady, a courtside Karen was what they called her. I remember when I talked to Harrison Fagan of silverscreenandroll.com, SB Nation's site, when he was on the podcast, where we were talking about courtside Karen. That was not planned for me as far as my rundown for what him and I would talk about. But with courtside Karen being the very next day, very previous day or 2 days prior, I said, Harrison, you cover the team. You've heard some stuff. Let's talk about courtside Karen right at the top of the show. So that's kind of the mindset I had. I was like, so when will things get back to somewhat normal or closer to normal than they were when things first shut down? NBA, you have a chance, and they had a chance to really say, oh, we could go full, but they don't want to. And then we saw the NBA playoffs. I know the beginning, I know the Pacers hosted a game in the play-in tournament, which I thought was kind of still a weird situation. Oh, side note, I don't know why it just came to my mind. This wasn't written down in my notes. But the NBA is talking about having a mid-season tournament probably next season. I know they're still going to discuss that at the end of the season, or even right now as we speak, or as you're listening to this podcast. And I want to say, for people to say the NBA fandom and the NBA fan and the appeal that the NBA has to people in the country and around the world, it's very amazing to me that the NBA is getting very, very gimmicky as far as what they want to do to really allow the players and force the players to attempt, their way to try and force the players to attempt to care more about the regular season. If my sport is at an all-time high for its fandom, if my sport is in a way that we believe is good for the game, why would you get gimmicky? If I'm doing something in my life and business and things are going well, and I used to be a car salesman, so I'm selling cars, and my method, my approach, my counters, as you have to counter with people when selling cars, those type of things, if they're working and we're just churning out things like clockwork, baby, boom, 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 boom. 2 cars here sold on a Monday. Take a Tuesday off, come back on Wednesday, sell a car. Come back on a Thursday, right before we close, sell a car. Nothing on a Friday. You get a hat trick on a Saturday. I'm not doing the quick math, but that's quite a few cars sold in a 5-day span. And baby, look, if things are going like clockwork, there's no reason to say anything. I don't believe the NBA fandom, as the NBA views it, is what people think it is. The NBA fandom, the NBA fan, you have a lot of diehards that are always going to be diehards. You have some diehards that are not as diehard as they used to be. And you have some casuals that are still casual and that are not really as casual as they used to be. They're watching less basketball. And I'm not even trying to make this a political conversation, but to me, the product, we'll talk about this in the very next segment, the product in the league right now is a little bit different. And to some, even people that work for different networks, not saying any names, someone that works for the worldwide leader made a very good point. To some, NBA basketball is not as enjoyable as it used to be. And if it was, the NBA, I don't believe, would get gimmicky. The play-in tournament, mid-season tournament. You see college basketball does that early on. They have tournaments. I know the Big 12 and I think the SEC have a in-season thing where you start league play that I think mid-February, beginning or mid-February. I think it's beginning of February, honestly. You're going to have the cross-conference matchups. Normally, those are reserved for non-league play at the beginning of the season, but they did change things up. And I think it's a great way to add some appeal and really to get more butts in the seats during that time period where you may be playing a bottom feeder in your conference where it's like, oh, no. This is Alabama playing, let's say, Kentucky. Alabama basketball, not normally known for really good basketball play, but this past year, they were really, really good. Nate Oates doing phenomenal jobs with that team down there in Tuscaloosa. Kentucky, John Calipari, you expecting to bounce back. You don't expect back-to-back seasons like Kentucky had last year. It works for college. For the NBA, I don't think they need to get gimmicky. Well, I don't think they should get gimmicky. I think gimmicky is really, really bad, and I think you're going to lose fans by trying to do these weird, odd things to provide more importance to the games. The NFL just added a game. I think the NBA is probably on the track to decrease the amount of games that these teams play, and I don't think decreasing games and adding an in-season tournament is very, very wise. But when I think about the fans in the stands, and I have been to different games this year, I have not been to a sold-out stadium at all this year. For any game that I've been to, or even last year, I went to a few high school football games. Remember the game was Center Grove versus Cathedral, and I remember that game was 50% capacity or 40% capacity. All I know was the cap was set at 3,000 people that would be allowed inside of the stadium there in Center Grove, southern of Indianapolis. I was actually out there and doing two things: watching the game and trying to scout a guy that Caden Curry, 4-star defensive end recruit, that Ohio State might end up landing. If they do, trust me, I will be oh so happy. But also went to some basketball games. The basketball games were not sold out. When no high school basketball game I went to. I didn't go to any college or NBA games this year. I don't believe I did. It was all the high school variety. And I went to a high school game. It was the Final Four. It was Lawrence North, the former school of Greg Oden and Mike Conley. Then they were playing Bloomington South, the winningest high school basketball coaches in Indiana history. He had over, I think, 1,000, maybe 1,100 wins in his career, over 50 plus years, 55 plus years that he's been coaching the high school basketball, and that game wasn't sold out. So I've not been inside of a sold-out arena in a very long time. My dad, honestly, this past Thursday, just came out and said he got bored at home. He hit up one of his buddies that he works out with and said, "Hey, Rodney, are there any games going on right now? Or is there anything that I can go get out and watch?" And Rodney Bustle has a young daughter, plays basketball at the high school, and I think she probably runs track as well. And that was the first thing on Rodney Bustle's mind. Rodney said, "No, there's nothing going on. The track meet for sectionals was on Tuesday." And then he came back at my dad and said, "Well, no. There's actually a boys track meet tonight at LC." My dad went there, and he really, 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 really enjoyed doing something that is normal for him. You know what seemed normal for me this past Sunday afternoon? Really, the first round of the NBA playoffs, really good matchups, the play-in tournament, the caliber, no. All those high scores, no. But I really, 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 really enjoy the atmospheres. Seeing the fans in the stands. The New York Knicks, the subject of this topic of the conversation, had a vaccinated area and an unvaccinated area. You can tell the vaccinated area, I still believe you have to wear the mask there in Madison Square Garden, because those that were vaccinated were still wearing the mask there, but they were shoulder to shoulder, like nothing was wrong, just they were covering their face. You also had those that were unvaccinated spread all the way out. Those are the rules in the Garden. That's what they do. So be it. But it was very, very enjoyable to hear the fans, hear the crowd, hear the roars, hear the boos, hear the FU chants. I liked it. Now, I'm not one that's going to go out and do the FU chant, but that's somewhat normal. You go to college basketball games, you hear things from the student section that they probably shouldn't hear, but we've grown accustomed to it. I went to a college basketball game at one time, and this one guy, the leading scorer on the team, the home team, he was at the free throw line rivalry game, and the opposing team student section was right behind that goal where he was shooting, and they said, "Pay your bookie." Now, you don't want anybody to put you on Front Street and say you didn't pay your bookie, but we expect those things. And I also expect, when I watch a basketball game, to hear a loud stadium, fans being very loud, fans doing what they do best, and that's cheer, that's boo, that's make up things to make fun of the opposition, and I love it. I absolutely love it. And one interesting thing about Madison Square Garden, well, a couple of them, and we'll close this segment out. Madison Square Garden seats at full capacity for a basketball game, because it can be expanded for other events that are inside the Garden, 19,812 people. That comes from Wikipedia. I believe they had 14,000. I've also heard up to 15,000 fans were allowed inside Madison Square Garden for Game 1 of the NBA playoffs, where they ended up losing a close game to the Atlanta Hawks. And inside of that, I love the sounds. I love the wars. I love how it sounded normal. But also when you get that organ doing the defense chant, and that, oh my gosh, I don't know, man. Like, the Garden special, there are so many special arenas around the country, but there's just something about New York fans. I'm not going to say they're I mean, they love their team. Their team has not been good for a very long time. They surely do love their team. And hearing those fans chant war again, and just do things they have wanted to do for over a year and a half, y'all, that was enjoyable, and I can't wait to hear more of it during this year's NBA playoffs. Last week, I put a poll out on Twitter, and this is something that I used to do consistently, sometimes daily, and then I've kind of fallen off the wagon here lately, but got to go back to doing that. It's a great way to engage with you, the listener, on the social media. It's also a great way to hear what different fans are thinking or saying about different topics. But the question on this Twitter poll, and if you want to follow me on Twitter at jsteven07. The question is, what decade of NBA basketball was more enjoyable to watch? And the responses go as follows. I will go from the least enjoyable to the most enjoyable, and you might be surprised when you hear the results. At 13% came in with the 1980s. At 19%, the 2010s. And there's a tie for first place. The 90s and 2000s. You think about the 80s in basketball, it's kind of like a decade where most people don't really think about how great the basketball was. Hakeem Olajuwon came in at that time. James Worthy came in at that time. Michael Jordan came in at that time. Magic Johnson came in the 70s, killed the 80s. Larry Bird came in the 70s, killed the 80s. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, early part of the 80s, I forget exactly when he retired, but he also killed in the 80s as well for the LA Lakers. You had Kevin McHale, Robert Parrish, that plethora of talent the Celtics had. You had the plethora of talent the Lakers had. There's so much talent in the 80s, but the basketball, to many people, and even when I go back and watch it, it's not as enjoyable based off of what I have grown to like and how the game has evolved. The game in the 80s really wasn't that appealing to many. Let's go to the second or the third place in this poll, the 2010s. Now, you see the social media really emerging, the Twitter and the Instagram, the highlight reel going away from the Sports Center to get your highlights to going to the social media and the Facebook and the Instagram and the Twitter and the old school Vine and the new school TikTok and all these different things, the Reddit boards. You have SB Nation having sites covering different teams in the NBA. I mean, there's so much difference to now versus the way that the NBA was in the 80s. And we hear it all the time, and this is true. Man, there's so much talent in the NBA right now. You can look at any team. Almost every team has 2 stars. Some have 3 stars. But you got Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. They're a star tandem, a star duo. You go to the Nets, that big 3 with KD, with Kyrie and Harden. Go to the Lakers, you got LeBron and AD. I mean, the list goes on and on and on of all these different teams that have stars. It's rare to find a team that doesn't really have any stars. Even a team barely making the play-in tournament or almost making the playoffs. And the Wizards, you got Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal. Those are 2 stars. Some say Bradley Beal should have left Washington. It should have gone somewhere else, but he decided to stay. I can't really knock him for making a decision for his own career and a place he wanted to play and really sticking it out there in Washington. So I get it. But with all the talent that we have in today's NBA, with all of the emotion that's out there that we see on display all of the time via how prominent social media is for so many sports fans, I find it very interesting that at this point in time, we're finding the NBA basketball to the viewer in the naked eye is not what it used to be. I grew up watching basketball in the 90s and then really grew to really love basketball even more in the 2000s. In those 2 decades, the basketball is different than what it is today. Yes, the emergence of the three-point shot, you found that in the latter part of the 2000s, really took off in the 2010s once Steph Curry and the Warriors really started to emerge. Not really with Steph Curry, with Steve Kerr, but when you had the Mark Jackson-led Warriors, and you also had the emergence of analytics. Well, that's a topic I could go off on for a while, but when you had those two things really emerge and to take over how basketball was played, especially for the Warriors team, you're absolutely finding that with all the talent, with all the coverage, with all the great players, with so many stars littered on so many different teams, it's very, very interesting that not just via this poll, but also people that are on the TV, that are on the radio, that are on podcasts like this one, many people say this decade, it's better to enjoy and to watch than the 80s, but it's nowhere near being as close to as watch in the 90s and 2000s. 13% for the 80s in this poll, 19% for the 2010s. The 90s and 2000s, they tied at 34%. So many people have come out and said the 90s were a horrible era of basketball. So many people have come out and said that the 90s were a decade of basketball brute force. The talent was there, but these guys, could they shoot? Not really. Could they dribble? Not really. They were really specialists. You got a guy on your team to really be a bruiser. You got a guy on your team to really just be a rebounder. That was his role. Well, don't you have role players in the NBA now? I mean, it's not like the teams don't have guys that are simply there to rebound. I mean, yeah, of course, Dennis Rodman was a rebounder. Can he do other things? Yes. But Dennis Rodman was a rebounder via his rebounding and his defense, found his way getting into the Hall of Fame. Another guy, Ben Wallace, who is a Hall of Famer next year, I believe, or maybe it'll be this year in the enshrinement ceremony, the very next one. He'll be in the Hall of Fame for defense and rebounding. I think Dennis Rodman deserves to be in. Ben Wallace won. If you had to get my vote, should Ben Wallace be in? I don't think so. But that's the way that people now and the voters are viewing the NBA. They're handing out more things to just anybody. I don't think everybody deserves the accolades and the appreciation for certain things that they have done that they're currently getting. 90s basketball was fun. I think if you take today's game and take a little bit of that game, allow more physicality, don't allow so much freedom of motion and freedom of movement, don't allow these teams in the offense to be so prevalent and to allow the offense to really dictate what goes on the court, and you allow defense to really be a more physical game, you want to get some of what you got in the 2000s, a lot more of that in today's game than you did yesterday or a couple of years ago. Because with the lack of physicality and there's so much shooting of the three-point shot and the layup, trust me, I'd rather take a 15-foot jump shot than a 25-foot three-pointer. But when we watch today's NBA, guys taking more 25-foot three-pointers, they're taking 15-foot wide-open jump shots. Why? Because the analytics say so. I think there's a place for analytics, but when it goes to the three-point shot and the layup, I get what they're saying. But the mid-range game, hoo-wee, is something that I wish would come back and stay. The 2000s, with the amount of talent that they had and the players, you can go back and look at some of those all-star teams. There are players in the NBA at that time that were not on the all-star team, but they were still dogs. They were still killers. Just like today. That's with any era. That's with anything you do. The dogs that were there was a lot of guys that were really, really good, just didn't make the all-star team. I get it. Injuries happen. Different things happen that derail players from being all-stars in every single season. But with the poll, the 80s being last, the 2000s being third place, tied for first with the 90s and 2000s, I think that's probably the right order for it to go. I'd probably put the 2000s slightly ahead of the 90s, because when you get the athletes, when you get the more athletic individual, the more athletic player, yes, watching Michael Jordan was fun, but watching so many other players and emergence and evolving of the big man and seeing more big men shoot more shots, more jump shots, three-pointers, and seeing more guys be ball handlers, I really think that brand of basketball 2000s was more enjoyable to watch. You know something else that's enjoyable to watch or to hear about? Because I know many of us do not watch the baseball. But hearing about and seeing all of these no-hitters, it's a feat that's rarely accomplished this quickly in this amount of time, this short period. To date right now, today is May 24th, 2021. Timestamp against recording at 2:18 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And to date right now, there have been 6 no-hitters right now, the first part of the season, which has never happened in this short amount of time ever in Major League Baseball history. There have been 6. The record for most no-hitters in a season is 8. You have Joe Musgrove, who pitched a no-hitter on April the 9th. You have Carlos Rodon, April 14th, pitched a no-hitter. John Means on May 5th, Wade Miley on May 7th, Spencer Turnbull on May 18th, and then Corey Kluber most recently, just a few days ago, on May 19th. And I saw stuff on the social media, and I've even heard people talk about how the no-hitter is being diminished, the appeal of it, and what the appeal of the accomplishment, and people actually pitching a no-hitter. It doesn't have it's not as special, that's the word. It's not as special as it used to be. And I really question and wonder, what are people saying? This is just like somebody saying Russell Westbrook getting so many triple doubles doesn't mean anything. I mean, it happens so much, it happens so frequent that it's not as special as it used to be. Okay, cool, he's averaging a triple double. How many guys have averaged a triple double in the history of the National Basketball Association? In a season? 2. I believe it's 2. Oscar Robertson, Russell Westbrook. Now, I do believe today Russell Westbrook has averaged a triple-double 3 or 4 times, and every time he's been on a new team, he's been kind of a journeyman the past 5-6 years. He has boosted that team's winning percentage instantly. Now, granted, he's an individual that I do not believe can be the best player on a team and win an NBA championship, which that's just his playing style. That's just how his skill set is. There are many players out there that are just like that, but that does not mean averaging a triple-double is not special. It's very special. And pitching a no-hitter, think about this. So there are 162 games that are played in Major League Baseball in a season. You do 162 times 30 for 30 teams. That's 4,860 games a Major League Baseball team plays every single season. Out of 4,860 games, you mean to tell me that there's only been the most no-hitters in any season is 8? And you're trying to say that because there's 6 in a short amount of time, in just a month and a half of baseball, almost 2 months of baseball, a month and a half, I think. I forget exactly when the season started. You're trying to tell me that that's not as special as it used to be? Please, I get it. Some people need to fill space on their show. Some people need to fill space in an article, and they want to reach for a take, as they call it, because they want to be different. There's nothing wrong with you just calling it how it is. I mean, I want to stand out as well, but being different and being wrong, that's not my MO. That's not something that I'm looking forward to doing. No, sir-ree, Bob. I encourage everybody. When you think about a no-hitter, when you played baseball, if you're a pitcher, did you ever pitch one? If you played baseball or softball, were you ever in a game where somebody pitched a no-hitter? How about we go this far? Because this is probably more likely than the no-hitter part. Have you ever been in a game where a pitcher pitched the entire game? No matter what level, little league, middle school, high school, college, minor league, low league, minor league, high league, minor league, single, double, and AAA, or Major League Baseball, or you're playing overseas. Have you ever been in a game where somebody has pitched a complete game itself? That's rare, especially nowadays. But even back in the day, that's still rare. So a complete game is rare. A no-hitter is even more rare. And there are people nowadays saying that the no-hitter is not as special as it used to be because it's happened so frequently. Please, I would encourage you to tell that person, or just think about how special it is to witness history. Because not every day somebody pitches a no-hitter. It's not every day we get to witness something special. And I think those special moments in sports, like pitching a no-hitter, still need to be remembered, still need to be acknowledged as being special feats in sports, in baseball, because that's exactly what they are. Thank you guys so much for listening to another episode of the Jay Stevens Podcast. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at jstevens07. You can also send all of your emails to jstevens317 at gmail.com. Remember to always subscribe, rate, and review. It's a great way for people that are searching for a new podcast to listen to to come across this one, then remember to always get the word out about the podcast via word of mouth. The things that we enjoy in life, we are almost willing and somewhat wired to tell other people about. So no matter if this was your first episode or if you have been listening since episode number 1, be sure to let people know about the podcast. This has been episode 197 of the James Stewart Podcast. I will see you next time.